The wolf inside him was gone, and so was his throne. Blood pooled beneath the stranger's body, black in the moonlight. I had been locking the chicken coop when I heard the collapse, the sound of weight hitting frozen ground just beyond my fence. I moved carefully, lantern raised, expecting a wounded animal. What I found was a man, massive and broken, his breath shallow, his armor torn, his eyes half open and unfocused. I didn't recognize the symbols on his torn cloak. I didn't know he was King Daniel, the alpha ruler betrayed by his own council and cursed by a sorcerer's blade to live without his wolf. I only knew he would die if I left him there. So I dragged him inside, my small hands shaking, my mother's voice whispering in my mind. You save what you can, even when it costs you. I bolted the door and began cleaning his wounds, unaware that the moment I touched his skin, fate had already made its choice. And in 3 nights, everything I knew about safety, solitude, and survival would shatter with a single kiss. I never expected to find a dying king on my doorstep, but then again, I never expected much from the world except cold and quiet. The forest at the edge of my land prefers silence. The village beyond prefers pretending I do not exist. That arrangement has suited me just fine. People ask things from you. The woods only take what they are owed. My name is Amira. The cottage I live in is the only thing my mother left me, along with a shelf of jars and a head full of instructions. Boil this until the water runs clear. Grind that until it smells sharp enough to sting. Press here to stop the bleeding. Breathe. Do not panic. My mother was a healer. I am only the echo of one. That night, the cold had teeth. It bit through my cloak as I crossed the yard, lantern in hand, heading for the chicken coop. Winter wolves had been bold lately, their howls dragging across the sky like torn cloth. I checked the hinges, scattered extra feed, whispered a reassurance I did not feel to the restless animals. Then I heard it. Not a howl, not the crack of a branch or the scurry of something small. A collapse, heavy, final, like a tree felled by lightning or a body hitting frozen earth. The sound came from beyond the fence. Every instinct said no. Go back inside, bar the door, let whatever the forest claimed stay claimed. But another instinct, older and quieter, pushed against it. My mother's voice, as clear as if she stood behind me. You save what you can, even when it costs you. I lifted the lantern higher and stepped through the gate. Snow swallowed my boots with a soft crunch. The wind pushed at my back as if eager to see what I would find. The forest watched, dark trunks standing shoulder to shoulder like silent witnesses. I followed the drag of disturbed snow, a broken line leading away from the path. My breath fogged the air in fast, sharp bursts. The lantern light found him first, steel and leather, and the wet shine of blood. He lay half on his side, half on his back, as if he had tried to rise and the earth refused to let him go. Armor torn open at the ribs, cloak shredded, blood pooled beneath him, already crusting at the edges where it met the frozen ground. His hair long, dark, tangled hid most of his face. What skin I could see was pale with the gray tinge of someone drifting toward the other side. For a heartbeat, all I did was stand there and listen. A faint, ragged inhale. Alive, barely. The lantern shook in my hand. This is not your problem, I told myself. Men who wear armor and embroidered cloaks belong to worlds that crush girls like you without noticing. If someone did this to him, they could still be nearby. If you touch him, you invite whatever curse he carries into your home. You save what you can. I swore under my breath and shoved the lantern into a drift so its light spread low and wide. Kneeling beside him, I pressed my fingers to his throat. His pulse thudded, uneven but stubborn. Up close, he seemed even larger, his shoulders broad enough to fill my doorway, his arms corded with muscle beneath torn sleeves. Scars scored his skin old, pale lines and newer ones still swollen. This was not a man unfamiliar with violence. Can you hear me? I asked. His eyelids twitched. For a moment, a sliver of dark iris showed, unfocused and wild. Then it vanished as his eyes rolled back. Good. Let him stay unconscious while I did something foolish. Dragging him was a lesson in humiliation. He was dead weight, armor and all, and I am not built for hauling giants through the snow. I hooked my hands under his arms and pulled, inch by inch, my boots slipping, my breath burning. Pain flared in my shoulders, my lower back, my fingers. More than once I considered leaving him right there and building a fire around him instead. But the image of my mother's hands pressing into a stranger's chest, her lips tight with effort as she breathed life back into a child half drowned in the river, would not leave me. She had never asked who deserved saving. She had simply saved. By the time I dragged him across the yard and up the 2 steps to the porch, my arms felt like they were made of wet rope. Getting him through the door required a combination of brute stubbornness, swearing, and a sharp kick to the lower hinge when it stuck. Somehow, we ended up inside, his boots scraping grooves into the floorboards as I hauled him toward the bed nearest the hearth. Once he was stretched out on the mattress, the cottage felt smaller, as if the walls had moved closer. He filled the space, his presence heavy even in unconsciousness. I slammed the door shut, slid the bolt, and dropped the bar into place. The world outside could have the forest. It was not getting in here without a fight. "Don't die," I muttered, shaking out my aching hands. "At least not until I've tried." I stoked the fire until it leapt high, then moved on instinct. Water in the pot, clean cloths from the chest, the small wooden box that held needles and gut string. Jars lifted and uncorked a pinch of dried yarrow, a smear of honey salve, a whiff of sharp spirits that burned my nose. When I cut away the torn leather at his ribs, I saw the wound properly. A deep, ugly slash angling from his side toward his sternum, edges jagged, as if whatever blade had made it had been eager to take more than flesh. Someone had tried to kill him quickly. They had almost succeeded. "Stupid man," I whispered, though I did not know if I meant him or myself. I cleaned the blood the way my mother taught me. Rinse, press, rinse again until the water ran clearer. He flinched once, twice, but did not wake. Under the grime and gore, his skin was hot with fever. Infection had already begun its crawl. "You're late," I told him, but not too late. Under my fingers, his muscles shivered. A low sound escaped his throat, almost a growl, but cut off too quickly, as if something inside him tried to rise and found nothing there. The air around us felt strange for a moment, humming, then went still. The hairs on my arms lifted. I ignored it. Magic belonged to other people. I had work to do. Threading the needle with gut string, I bent over the wound and began to stitch. The rhythm steadied me. In, pull, knot, breathe. Blood slicked my gloves, soaked the sheets, spattered my forearms. The smell of iron and smoke wrapped around us both. "Stay," I ordered him, as if he were one of my wayward goats. "If you die on my bed after all this effort, I will kill you again." It took longer than it should have. When I finally tied off the last stitch, my fingers cramped. I smeared salve over the angry line and bandaged it tight. Then I checked the rest of him: bruised ribs, a gash along his thigh, a cut at the hairline where something had split the skin. Evidence of a fight meant for more than one man. I peeled away his cloak last. Symbols I did not recognize had been embroidered along the lining in thread darkened with old blood and smoke. They prickled at the back of my neck. Not village work. Not anything simple. "Your trouble," I said softly. He did not answer, but his chest rose and fell, a fraction steadier than before. That would have to be enough. Exhaustion hit me all at once. I sank onto the stool beside the bed, rubbing at the ache in my shoulders. Outside, the wind clawed at the shutters, furious and high. Inside, the fire cracked, throwing shadows across the stranger's face. Only then, when there was nothing left to do but wait, did fear finally catch up. I had dragged a stranger from the forest, a man with a soldier's body and a king's cloak, a man someone powerful clearly wanted dead. Whatever hunted him would come looking. If I had any sense, I would have turned him back to the snow. Instead, I reached out and laid my hand against his wrist, feeling for the beat of his pulse. It thudded against my fingertips, weak, but there. "Fine," I whispered. "Live then, but if you bring your enemies to my door, you and I will have words." His fingers twitched around mine, the barest movement, as if answering a bargain neither of us had spoken aloud. I did not know his name. I did not know he had once commanded armies, or that whole packs had howled for him. I did not know his wolf had been stolen, leaving a hollow where his power used to sit. All I knew was that I had chosen. I banked the fire, checked the bolts on the door again, and settled into the chair beside his bed. Outside, the forest howled. Inside, a stranger bled and breathed and pulled at something in me I did not yet have words for. I told myself I would stay awake, watch him through the night, and send him on his way come morning. But fate had already changed its course the moment I dragged him in from the snow. He didn't speak the first night. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire, the rasp of his breathing, and the soft, wet scrape of cloth over blood. I worked by candlelight, the flame guttering whenever the wind knifed against the shutters. My hands stayed steady, the way my mother trained them to, but my heart would not listen. It pounded at the base of my throat, too loud in the small room. The gash across his ribs was angry and swollen, heat rolling off it in waves. Every time I pressed a clean cloth into it, he groaned, a low, broken sound that made the tiny hairs on my arms rise. There was something wrong in the air around him, something that hummed beneath my skin whenever I touched him. It felt like standing too close to a storm, charged, expectant, dangerous. Fear, I told myself. That's all. Just fear, and too much imagination. I spoke anyway, because silence was worse. "Try not to die," I muttered as I changed the bandage. "I've already ruined the sheets for you." He didn't answer. His lashes lay dark against his cheeks, his mouth set in a line that looked stubborn even in unconsciousness. I finished my work, wiped my hands, and sat back, watching his chest rise and fall. The rhythm was ragged, but present. I kept the chair by his bed that night. Every time he shifted, I jerked awake, fingers already reaching for him, checking his pulse, his temperature, the bandage. Once, in the darkest part of the night, he whispered something I couldn't catch. A name, maybe, or a plea. The sound of it scraped raw at my chest. By dawn, my eyes burned and my neck ached from sleep stolen in snatches. He was still alive. That counted as a victory. The second night, he woke. It happened after sunset. I had just finished checking his stitches, smoothing fresh salve over the wound. His skin was still too hot, but the edges of the gash looked cleaner. I told myself that meant he was fighting. I told myself that meant this wasn't foolishness. His hand shot out and closed around my wrist. I froze. His grip was iron despite the fever, fingers digging into my skin. I followed the line of his arm, over corded muscle and half-healed bruises, up to his face. His eyes were open, dark, sharp. A storm held behind pupils blown too wide. For a moment, we just stared at each other. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my mouth. Then his gaze dropped to where my hand rested against his ribs, then flicked back up. His fingers tightened. "You should have left me," he said. His voice was rough, like it had been dragged over stone. It vibrated up my arm where he held me, sank under my skin. I swallowed hard. "I don't leave people to die," I answered. We stayed like that, locked in a strange, brittle stillness, while the fire popped and hissed beside us. Then his grip loosened. His head fell back against the pillow. For a heartbeat, I thought he might pass out again. Instead, he huffed a breath that might have been a laugh if it weren't so bitter. "Reckless," he murmured. "Or foolish." "Both?" I said. "Now lie still. You're heavy enough without tearing the stitches open." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, then it was gone. "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated, as if the answer weighed something. "Daniel," he said finally. Just that. No family name, no title, nothing to tell me who he truly was. But the single word sat in the air like it mattered, like people somewhere had once said it with reverence or fear. "I'm Amira," I said. "This is my cottage. You're bleeding on it." "Apologies," he said, but his eyes were already sliding shut again, exhaustion dragging him under. Over the next hours, he drifted in and out of consciousness, words coming in fragments. Betrayal, steel in the dark, a council chamber, a blade that burned, someone he trusted standing over him with cold eyes and colder magic. Something stolen, though he never said what, and the way his voice broke when he tried made me glad he didn't. I didn't press. I brought him broth and tipped it carefully against his lips, coaxing him to swallow. I changed his bandages, washed sweat from his brow, listened to the fever mumblings that slipped past his guard. When the silence grew heavy enough to press on my ribs, I filled it. I told him about my mother, about how the villagers came to her door with broken bones and sick children and long, hopeless faces, how they had stopped coming after she died, and how their pity had turned to suspicion when I chose to stay in the cottage alone. "Cursed," they whispered. "Odd. Not right. A girl who doesn't know her place." I told him I preferred the forest's honesty. He listened. Even when his eyes were closed, I could feel his attention on me, like a hand laid lightly between my shoulder blades. When he did look at me, truly look, it was with a focus that made heat creep up my throat. He watched my mouth when I spoke, traced the movements of my hands as if memorizing them. No one had ever looked at me like that before, as if my words were not an inconvenience but a map he was determined to follow. "Did you love her?" he asked once, voice soft. "My mother?" I stared at the bandage I was tying. "Yes. Do you miss her?" "Every day." Silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It hummed, filled with things neither of us knew how to say. "I understand," he said at last. That was all. But something in me eased, like a knot pulled loose. When his hand brushed mine later accidental, a slip as he shifted everything inside me tightened again. The contact was brief, skin against skin, callus against callus, but it felt like a spark had jumped between us. My breath hitched. The air grew thick. I pulled back too quickly, nearly spilling the basin. "Sorry," I muttered. His gaze dropped to my fingers, then rose to my face. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between us. My pulse pounded in my ears. There it was again, that strange pull, like a rope around my chest being drawn slowly, inexorably tighter. It wasn't only fear. It was something darker, heavier, threaded with curiosity and heat. On the third night, the cottage became too small to contain it. He was stronger by then. Color had crept back into his cheeks. He could sit up for short stretches, though doing so left a sheen of sweat along his brow. I pretended not to notice the way his muscles bunched beneath his skin, the way his eyes followed me when I moved around the room. We ate in near silence, the fire throwing restless shadows across the walls. Outside, snow fell in a slow, relentless curtain, muting the world beyond my door. Inside, everything felt sharper. "Why do you live out here alone?" he asked, breaking the quiet. "Because people are loud," I said, "and cruel when they don't understand something. And they don't understand you." It wasn't a question. I shrugged one shoulder. "They don't try." He studied me for a long moment. "They were wrong," he said. The words landed in my chest like a stone in deep water, sending ripples through every place in me I liked to pretend was numb. I busied myself with the tea, hands a little clumsier than usual. "Who betrayed you?" I asked before I could stop myself. He went still. For a heartbeat, I regretted the question. Then, he spoke. "Someone who knew me better than anyone," he said. "Or should have. Someone I trusted with everything." His gaze found the fire instead of me, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. "They took something from me," he continued. "Something I thought I couldn't live without." "What was it?" His eyes met mine. There was so much in them. Rage, grief, something feral and aching. "Myself," he said quietly. The room seemed to tilt. I didn't understand, not fully, but I felt the truth of his words like a bruise. "I'm still here," he added, almost as if arguing with himself. "But not all of me." Without thinking, I reached out and laid my hand over his, the way my mother used to when someone spoke of a hurt too deep for herbs to touch. His fingers turned under mine and curled around them. The pull roared to life, hot, electric, undeniable. It swept through me from my hand to my shoulder to the hollow of my throat, leaving goose flesh in its wake. I sucked in a breath. Daniel's eyes darkened. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist, slow and deliberate, as if he were feeling my pulse race beneath the skin. The air between us tightened until it felt like even one more breath would make it snap. I should have pulled away. I didn't. We sat like that, hand in hand, the fire crackling and the snow whispering against the roof, while something immense and unseen shifted quietly between us. On the third night, the tension stopped being something we could ignore. We sat close that third night, closer than necessary. The cottage had become a world unto itself. Snow sealed us in, muffling everything beyond the walls until only the fire's crackle and our breathing remained. I should have given him space. He was healing, stronger each day, soon ready to leave. But I found myself drawn back to the chair beside him, to the circle of candlelight where his presence pulled at something deep in my chest. He watched me as I approached, his gaze tracking every step. I sat, and the silence between us felt alive, charged with everything we hadn't said. The candlelight carved shadows across his face, sharpening the line of his jaw, the shape of his mouth. When he shifted, our knees touched. Neither of us moved away. "You don't have to stay with me," I said quietly, though I didn't know if I meant tonight or something larger. "I know." His eyes held mine, dark and depthless. "But I want to." The words sank into me like stones into water. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Every breath I took, he took with me. Every exhale matched his. The rope around my chest that had been tightening for 3 days pulled taut. Daniel. Amira. The way he said my name made heat bloom low in my stomach. His hand lifted, slow and deliberate, and brushed a strand of hair back from my face. His fingers lingered at my jaw, thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. My skin burned where he touched. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us, leaning into the space between, closing the unbearable distance. Our lips met softly at first, hesitant, testing. Then something inside me broke open. I pressed closer, my hand curling into the fabric of his shirt, and he answered with a low sound that vibrated through my bones. The kiss deepened, turned desperate, hungry, like we were both starving and had finally been given permission to devour. His hand slid into my hair. Mine found the solid heat of his chest. The world narrowed to the taste of him, the weight of his mouth on mine, the way his breath hitched when the bond ignited. It didn't whisper. It roared. Fire exploded through my veins, burning and undeniable, a second heartbeat slamming into existence inside my chest. I gasped against his mouth, and he jerked back, eyes wide and wild. Daniel, what? He convulsed. His entire body arched violently, head snapping back, a sound tearing from his throat that was half scream, half roar. I scrambled away, heart hammering, terror flooding cold through the heat. His hands clawed at the mattress, ripping fabric, splintering wood beneath his grip. Power erupted from him. A shockwave slammed into me like a fist, throwing me backward. I hit the floor hard, the air punching out of my lungs. The table beside me splintered with a crack like thunder. Jars shattered, candlelight guttered and flared. The fire in the hearth surged, flames licking toward the ceiling. I tried to push myself up, gasping, and froze. Daniel was changing. His eyes blazed gold, so bright I had to squint against them. His skin rippled, muscles shifting beneath it in ways that shouldn't be possible. Bones cracked and reformed. His fingers lengthened into claws that dug furrows into the floorboards. A sound built in his chest, low and primal, growing louder, until it exploded into a roar that shook the walls. His wolf. I understood it with a certainty that bypassed thought. It was returning. The air around him shimmered with heat and raw power. His back bowed, shoulders broadening impossibly, and for a terrifying moment I thought he would lose himself entirely, dissolve into the beast surging back into his body. He threw his head back and howled, the sound half human, half animal, filled with agony and rage and something that felt like relief so overwhelming it broke. And I felt it, inside me, in that second heartbeat pounding against my own. I felt his pain, the years of emptiness, the hollow place where his wolf should have lived. I felt the curse shatter like glass, felt the rush of power pouring back into him, wild and uncontrollable. I felt his fury at the betrayal, his grief, his joy. The bond snapped fully into place. It locked around my ribs like iron, unbreakable and absolute. My breath was his breath. His heartbeat thundered in my ears alongside my own. The world tilted, and I couldn't tell where I ended, and he began. He collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, gasping, shaking. The golden glow in his eyes flickered, dimmed, then steadied into something less blinding but no less fierce. His claws retracted slowly. His breathing evened. When he finally lifted his head, his gaze found mine across the wreckage of the room. We stared at each other, both of us trembling. "You're my mate," he said, voice raw and broken and sure. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The bond thrummed between us, alive and insistent, pulling me toward him even as my mind screamed caution. He pushed himself upright, still shaking, and took a step toward me. Then another. I should have moved, should have run. Instead, I stayed frozen, my back against the wall, my heart a wild thing beating against the cage of my ribs. He stopped just in front of me and dropped to his knees, so we were eye to eye. "I'm Daniel Ashford," he said, each word deliberate. "Alpha, king of the northern packs. I was cursed, betrayed, and left to die. And you." His hand lifted, cupping my face with a gentleness that didn't match the wildness still burning in his eyes. "You broke it. You brought my wolf back. How?" I whispered. "The mate bond." His thumb brushed my cheek. "It's the one magic stronger than any curse. But I didn't know I couldn't feel it until we kissed." Yes. The single word hung between us, heavy with implications I was only beginning to understand. I didn't ask for this, I said, though my voice shook. I know. I don't even know what this is. Neither do I. His forehead dropped to mine, his breath warm against my lips. But it's done. The bond is sealed. I can feel you, Amira, inside me. Your heartbeat. Your fear. Your... He stopped, jaw clenching. What? I asked. His eyes opened, molten gold bleeding into the edges of dark brown. Your desire. Heat flooded my face. I tried to pull back, but his hand slid to the nape of my neck, holding me gently in place. Don't, he murmured. Don't hide from me. Not now. You're a king, and you're my mate. That makes you a queen. I'm a girl who lives in the woods and talks to chickens. His mouth curved, the barest hint of a smile, the first real one I'd seen. Then I'm a king who's very fond of chickens. Despite everything, the shattered room, the impossible bond, the terror still singing through my veins, I laughed. It came out broken and a little hysterical, but it was real. He pulled me closer, carefully, as if I might shatter. I let him. The bond hummed with approval, settling into place like it had been waiting for this my entire life. His arms wrapped around me, solid and warm, and I buried my face against his chest. Beneath my ear, his heart pounded in rhythm with the second beat inside me. What happens now? I whispered. His hand stroked down my back, slow and soothing. Now, he said quietly, we survive. Because the man who cursed me will know the bond formed. He'll know my wolf returned, and he'll come to finish what he started. Fear spiked through me. His arms tightened in response. I won't let him touch you, Daniel said, and the promise in his voice was edged with violence. I'll burn the world down first. I should have been frightened by the possessiveness in his tone, the alpha instinct bleeding through. Instead, I felt safer than I had in years. We stayed like that, tangled together on the floor amid broken wood and spilled wax, until exhaustion dragged us toward the bed. He pulled me with him, his body curling protectively around mine, his hand splayed across my stomach. His breath was warm and steady against my hair, and the bond pulsed between us like a living thing. Sleep, he murmured. I'll keep watch. But his eyes were already closing, his wolf finally at peace for the first time in years. I lay awake longer, feeling the weight of his arm, the rise and fall of his chest, the impossible reality that I was bonded to a king the world wanted dead. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I let myself be held. Daniel told me everything that night. We sat in the wreckage of the cottage, surrounded by splintered wood and spilled wax, and he spoke in a low, steady voice that barely contained the fury beneath. He was Daniel Ashford, Alpha King of the Northern Packs, commander of armies, ruler of territories that stretched from the frozen peaks to the southern valleys, and Victor Calloway, his most trusted advisor, the man who had stood at his right hand for a decade, had driven a cursed blade into his ribs and stolen his wolf. He's a sorcerer, Daniel said, staring at his hands as if they still felt foreign. I didn't know until it was too late. He hid it well, played the loyal counselor while gathering power in the shadows. When he struck, he did it in front of the council, made it look like I'd gone feral, lost control. They believed him. His jaw tightened, and through the bond I felt the spike of his rage, sharp enough to make my breath hitch. The curse didn't just take my wolf, he continued. It severed me from the pack mind, made me mortal, left me bleeding out in the snow. Victor's soldiers dumped me in the forest and walked away. They never expected anyone to find me. Never imagined the mate bond could break a curse that powerful. I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to process the impossible weight of what he was saying. And now? I asked. His eyes met mine, dark and full of something that made my stomach twist. Now he knows. The moment the bond formed, the moment my wolf returned, he felt it. Sorcerers like him can sense shifts in power that large. He'll know I'm alive. He'll know you exist. Me? You're my mate, Amira. That makes you the greatest threat to his claim on the throne. If he kills me, the bond will shatter you. If he takes you, his voice broke off, hands curling into fists. He'll use you to control me, to break me. The bond flared hot and sharp between us, flooded with his terror. Not for himself, for me. They'll come for us, he said quietly. For you. I wanted to be angry. Wanted to rage at him for dragging his war to my doorstep, for turning my quiet, lonely life into a target. But all I felt through the bond was his anguish, his guilt, the way his fear for me carved through him like a blade. How long do we have? I asked. 2 days, maybe less. 2 days to prepare for soldiers and sorcery and a king who wanted us dead. Then we don't waste time, I said, standing. We moved through the cottage in tense silence, gathering what little we could carry. I packed dried meat, herbs, bandages, the small knife my mother had left me. Daniel salvaged his torn armor, tested the weight of the hunting axe hanging above the door. His strength was returning. I could see it in the way he moved, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. He was still healing, still learning to breathe with his wolf back inside him. "Can you fight?" I asked. "Not like I used to. Not yet." His eyes flicked to me, gold bleeding into the edges. "But I'll die before I let them touch you." The certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it settled something restless in my chest. We slept in shifts that night, though neither of us truly rested. Every creak of the cottage, every gust of wind made us jolt upright, hands reaching for weapons. When I finally dozed, I woke to find Daniel sitting at the window, staring into the dark, his body coiled tight as a spring. "Come here," he said without looking at me. I crossed to him, and he pulled me down into his lap, arms wrapping around me like I was something precious and breakable. His face pressed into my hair, and I felt him inhale, long and slow, as if memorizing my scent. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For all of this, you deserved a quiet life." "Quiet is overrated," I said, and felt his chest shake with something that might have been a laugh. His hand slid up to cup my face, tilting it so our eyes met. "I will keep you safe," he said. "I swear it. We'll keep each other safe," I corrected. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and the bond sang between us, warm and fierce. "Stubborn," he murmured. "You have no idea." He kissed me then, soft and aching, and I let myself sink into it, into the impossible reality that this man, this king, was mine, and I was his, and we would face whatever came next together. Dawn came too quickly. The soldiers arrived with it. I was gathering the last of our supplies when Daniel went rigid, his head snapping toward the door. Through the bond, I felt the surge of his instincts, sharp and primal. "They're here," he said. My heart slammed into my throat. "How many?" "Too many." He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back door, but we didn't make it 3 steps before the front door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Smoke poured through. Soldiers in black armor poured in behind it, blades drawn, eyes cold. "Run!" Daniel roared. We ran. Out the back, into the snow, into the forest I had lived beside my entire life. Behind us, shouts erupted, boots pounded, arrows hissed through the air, one slamming into the tree beside my head with a vicious thunk. I had never run for my life before, had never felt the raw animal terror of being prey. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. The snow dragged at my boots, slowing me, and panic clawed up my throat. Daniel's hand locked around mine, pulling me forward, his grip unbreakable. "Don't look back," he commanded. "Stay with me." The bond thrummed with his determination, his focus, and it poured into me like fire, pushing back the fear. I ran harder, faster, my breath tearing ragged from my chest. Behind us, wolves howled, real wolves, not men, and the sound made ice flood my veins. "They brought hunters," Daniel growled. "Keep moving." We plunged deeper into the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us. An arrow whistled past my ear, so close I felt the air split. Daniel yanked me sideways, and we dove behind a fallen tree, just as another volley slammed into the bark where we'd been standing. "How many?" I gasped. 8 soldiers, 3 wolves. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf surging just beneath his skin. "Stay low." He moved before I could argue, rising and launching himself at the nearest soldier with brutal efficiency. I watched, frozen, as he tore through them, fists, claws, teeth, his wolf bleeding into every movement. He was deadly, savage, and terrifying. And mine. One soldier broke past him, eyes locking on me. I grabbed the knife from my belt and slashed as he lunged. The blade caught his arm, and he roared, backhanding me hard enough to send me sprawling into the snow. Pain exploded across my face. Through the bond, Daniel felt it. His roar shook the trees. He was on the soldier in a heartbeat, and what he did next was nothing human. When he stepped back, the man didn't get up. Daniel turned to me, blood on his hands, his chest heaving. The gold in his eyes was wild, feral, barely controlled. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I'm fine." He pulled me to my feet, his hands shaking as he checked my face, my arms, everywhere. We need to move, I said. More will come. He nodded, but his hand stayed locked around mine, his wolf unwilling to let me out of reach. We ran until my legs gave out, until the sun climbed high and the sounds of pursuit faded behind us. Only then did we stop, collapsing in a small hollow beneath a rocky overhang. I gasped for air, my entire body trembling. Daniel pulled me against him, his arms tight, his heart slamming against mine. I thought I lost you, he said, voice rough. You didn't. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my face up. His eyes searched mine, desperate and fierce. I can't lose you, Amira. Do you understand? I can't. You won't, I whispered. He kissed me hard, claiming, as if sealing the promise with his mouth. When he pulled back, his forehead pressed to mine, his breathing still uneven. We'll survive this, he said, together. That night, huddled in the cold and dark, he held me close, his body curled protectively around mine. His breath was warm against my hair, his hand resting over my heart. I'm grateful our paths crossed, he whispered into the silence. Even if it brought you danger, even if it cost me everything else, I'd choose you, every time. My throat tightened. I laced my fingers through his. Then we fight, I said. For each other. For this. His arms tightened, and through the bond, I felt his love wash over me, fierce and unshakable. Always, he promised, and I believed him. We survived the first pursuit, but barely. 3 soldiers lay dead in the snow behind us, their blood already freezing into dark patches that would linger until spring. Daniel stood over them, chest heaving, his hands still clawed, his eyes still burning gold. I watched from where I'd fallen, my back pressed against a tree, and understood for the first time what it truly meant to be mated to an alpha. He was a force of nature, brutal, efficient, utterly lethal. When the last soldier had grabbed my arm, fingers digging into my flesh hard enough to bruise, Daniel hadn't hesitated. He'd torn the man apart, not metaphorically, not cleanly. The soldier's scream had cut off mid-breath, and then there was only the sound of tearing and the wet crunch of bone. I should have been horrified. Part of me was. The part that had lived a quiet life, that had never seen violence up close, that still believed the world could be gentle if you asked it nicely enough. But another part deeper, darker, threaded through with the bond's fierce heat, felt safe. Because no one would ever touch me again without answering to him. Daniel turned slowly, his gaze finding mine across the blood-stained clearing. For a heartbeat, I saw the wildness in him, the wolf barely leashed beneath his skin. Then his eyes cleared, the gold fading back into dark brown, and he was moving, crossing the distance between us in 3 long strides. Amira. My name came out ragged. He dropped to his knees in front of me, hands hovering as if afraid to touch. Are you hurt? I'm fine. You're bleeding. I followed his gaze to my shoulder, where the soldier's blade had caught me. The cut wasn't deep, but blood soaked through my sleeve, dark and wet. I hadn't even felt it until now. It's nothing, I said. His jaw clenched. Through the bond, I felt his fury spike again, felt the way his wolf snarled and clawed for release. We need to move, he said tightly, before more come. We found shelter in a cave as the sun set, a shallow hollow tucked into the hillside and hidden behind a curtain of frozen vines. Daniel checked it twice for threats before allowing me inside, his body tense, his senses stretched to their limits. Only when he was satisfied did he finally let himself exhale. I sank onto the cold stone floor, exhaustion crashing over me in waves. My hands shook, my legs felt like water. The adrenaline that had kept me moving drained away all at once, leaving me hollow and brittle. Daniel knelt beside me and carefully peeled back my torn sleeve. His hands were shaking. It's not deep, I said again, trying to reassure him. You're bleeding because of me. His voice was low, strained. Because I brought this war to your door. I chose to stay. You didn't choose to be hunted. He pulled a strip of cloth from his pack and pressed it against the wound, his touch gentle despite the violence still humming beneath his skin. I hissed at the sting, and his hands stilled immediately. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be. I caught his wrist, held it. I'm still here. I'm still alive. His eyes lifted to mine, and the anguish in them made my chest ache. I can't lose you, he said, and the words sounded like they'd been torn from somewhere deep. Not you. Not the mother of my unborn heir. Not the only good thing left in this God's damned world. The confession hung between us, raw and aching. I reached up and cupped his face, feeling the rough scrape of his beard, the heat of his skin. "You won't lose me," I said firmly. He closed his eyes and leaned into my touch, his breath shuddering out. But even as I said it, I felt the truth of what we'd become. The bond wasn't just a connection, it was a weapon. A weakness, a double-edged blade that could save us or destroy us, depending on how it was wielded. When I hurt, he felt it. When he was in danger, my heart raced with his, my breath shortened, my body responded as if the threat were my own. We were stronger together, our instincts sharpened, our resilience doubled, but we were also vulnerable in ways neither of us had been before. If they wanted to break him, all they had to do was hurt me. If they wanted to shatter me, all they had to do was kill him. "This bond," I said quietly. "It's not just a gift, is it?" Daniel opened his eyes, and the gold bled back into the edges. "No," he admitted, "it's not." Over the following weeks, we moved like ghosts through hostile territories, always one step ahead of Victor's hunters, always listening for the howl that would mean we'd been found. We traveled by night, slept in shifts, ate whatever we could, forage or kill. The world became a blur of cold, hunger, and constant vigilance. But we weren't entirely alone. Slowly, carefully, we made contact with wolves still loyal to Daniel's soldiers who had never believed Victor's lies, packs who remembered what true leadership looked like. They came in ones and twos, slipping through the trees under cover of darkness, kneeling before their king and swearing oaths that made the bond hum with approval. And I learned to fight, not with grace or skill, but with desperation and instinct. Daniel taught me how to hold a blade, how to move quietly, how to read the shift of shadows and the language of broken branches. I learned to trust my senses the way my mother had taught me to trust my hands, to feel the forest's rhythms, to know when something was wrong before I saw it. I learned that being Luna didn't mean standing behind the alpha. It meant standing beside him. It meant being the one who kept him sane when his wolf demanded blood, who pulled him back from the edge when rage threatened to consume him. One night, after a particularly brutal skirmish that left 2 of Victor's scouts dead and Daniel's knuckles split and bleeding, I found him sitting alone at the edge of our camp, staring into the dark. The bond thrummed with his turmoil, a churning mix of fury and guilt and exhaustion. I sat beside him without speaking. "I'm becoming a monster," he said after a long silence. "No. You're becoming what you need to be to survive. There's a difference?" "Yes." I took his bloodied hand in mine, uncaring of the mess. "A monster kills because it wants to. You kill because you have to. Because you're protecting what's yours. And when I stop being able to tell the difference, then I'll remind you." He looked at me, eyes searching, and through the bond I felt his love crash over me like a wave, fierce, consuming, edged with desperation. "You're too good for this world," he said roughly, "and you're too hard on yourself." His mouth curved, just barely. "Stubborn woman. You knew that when you mated me." He pulled me into his lap, arms wrapping tight, and buried his face against my neck. I felt him inhale deeply, drawing my scent into his lungs, letting it calm the wildness beneath his skin. "I never believed my peaceful life could be troubled like this," I whispered into his hair. "I thought the worst I'd face was a harsh winter or a sick animal." "I'm sorry. Don't be." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I never believed I could feel this alive either. This needed. This fierce." His hand slid up to cup the back of my neck, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin there. "You're not just needed, Amira. You're essential. To me, to this, to everything." He kissed me then, slow and deep, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his mouth. The bond flared between us, hot and bright, binding us tighter with every breath. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "We only have each other now," he said quietly. "No throne, no pack, no safety, just us." "Then we'll be enough," I said. And I meant it. Because being Luna didn't mean being weak. It meant being the spine that held the alpha upright when the weight became too much. It meant fighting beside him, bleeding beside him, and refusing to break even when the world demanded it. We were hunted, outnumbered, vulnerable, but we were together, and that made us dangerous. Daniel's loyal wolves found us in the eastern hills. We'd been running for nearly a month when they appeared, shadows slipping between trees, moving with the coordinated silence of trained soldiers. Daniel pushed me behind him immediately, his body coiled to strike, but then he went still. Through the bond, I felt recognition surge through him, sharp and fierce. "Matthias," he breathed. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered and scarred, his eyes the pale gray of winter ice. He took one look at Daniel alive, whole, his wolf restored, and dropped to one knee. The others followed, a dozen wolves kneeling in the snow, heads bowed. "My king," Matthias said, his voice rough with emotion. "We never believed Victor's lies. We've been searching for you since the night you disappeared." Daniel's throat worked. I felt the flood of relief through the bond, so strong it made my knees weak. "Rise," he commanded, and they obeyed as one. Their eyes found me next, standing at Daniel's shoulder, and I watched curiosity flicker across their faces. I was not what they expected. No noble bearing, no warrior's stance, just a woman in worn clothes with dirt under her nails and a healing cut on her shoulder. But when Daniel's hand found mine and pulled me forward, not a single one of them looked away. "This is Amira," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "My mate, your Luna." They bowed again, deeper this time, and when they rose, I saw respect in their eyes, not because of who I was, but because of who Daniel said I was. Matthias stepped closer, studying me with sharp intelligence. "The bond broke the curse," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Then Victor will know. He'll be expecting you." "Good. Let him expect me." We made camp that night in a hidden valley, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without Daniel having to keep watch alone. His wolves stood guard, their presence a barrier between us and the rest of the world. In the morning, the planning began. Victor had fortified his position. The castle was crawling with hired soldiers, mercenaries who didn't care about loyalty, only gold. Sorcery laced the walls, wards designed to repel wolves and amplify Victor's power. Taking it by force alone would be a slaughter. But Daniel knew the castle's weaknesses. He'd grown up in those halls, walked those corridors 1,000 times, and I had something Victor wouldn't expect. While the others strategized troop movements and attack points, I studied. Matthias brought me what little they'd learned about Victor's magic, and I pored over it with the same focus my mother had taught me to apply to herbs. Curses, rooted in blood and earth. Wards built on sacrifice and bone. Dark, brutal magic that demanded a price. But every spell had a flaw. Every curse had a weak point. I might not have magic, but I understood plants. I understood poisons, and I understood how to disrupt systems that relied on balance. "Wolfsbane and ironroot," I said one evening, spreading my notes before Daniel. "Mixed with ash from burned rowan. It won't break his wards, but it'll weaken them long enough for your wolves to get through." He stared at me, something fierce and awed burning in his eyes. "You're brilliant," he said. "I'm practical. You're mine." He kissed me then, hard and claiming, and the bond sang with his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that we would win this. The night before the attack, we stood alone on the ridge overlooking the capital. The castle rose against the skyline, dark and imposing, lit from within by torches that looked like distant stars. Somewhere inside those walls, Victor waited, believing himself untouchable. "You don't have to come," Daniel said quietly. I turned to him, saw the worry etched into every line of his face. "Yes, I do. Amira, I'm not staying behind, Daniel. We fight together. That's what the bond means." His jaw clenched. Through our connection, I felt his fear for me warring with his need to have me at his side. "If anything happens to you, it won't. If it does," I grabbed his face and forced him to look at me. "Then you keep fighting. You take back your throne. You build the world we're supposed to have. Do you understand?" His hands covered mine, gripping tight. "I can't do this without you. You won't have to." He pulled me against him, his arms iron bands around my ribs, and kissed me. Not with the desperation of that first night in the cottage, not with the wild hunger of the nights we'd spent running. This kiss was different. Certain, a promise sealed in breath and touch. When he pulled back, his eyes blazed gold. "You are my queen," he said, voice rough with conviction. "Not because of the bond, not because fate chose you, because you chose to stand when you could have run, because you fought beside me when anyone sane would have fled, because you are the strongest person I have ever known." My throat tightened. "You will bear my children," he continued, each word deliberate. "You will rule beside me. You will grow old with me, and when we're ancient and gray, I will still look at you the way I'm looking at you now, like you're the only thing in this world worth fighting for. Tears burned hot behind my eyes. That's a lot of assumptions, I managed. That's a vow. He kissed me again, softer this time, and I tasted the promise on his lips. Below us, the capital waited. Victor waited. War waited. But in that moment, standing on the ridge with Daniel's arms around me and the bond humming fierce and bright between us, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. "Let's take back your throne," I said. His smile was all wolf. "Our throne," he corrected. "Let's take back our throne." And when dawn broke over the eastern hills, we marched on the capital together. A wolfless king who'd found his strength again, a forest girl who'd become a queen, and an army of wolves who believed that loyalty was worth more than gold. Victor's reign ended the moment we crossed the valley. He just didn't know it yet. The battle was brutal. We struck at dawn, when the world was still caught between darkness and light. Daniel led the charge, and I watched my mate become something beyond human, his wolf fully unleashed, a force of nature that tore through Victor's defenses like they were made of paper. Soldiers fell, wards shattered. The air itself seemed to bend around him as he carved a path toward the throne room. I moved with the second wave, Matthias and 3 others flanking me as I clutched the leather pouch of counter-curse herbs against my chest. My hands were steady. My heart was not. The bond thrummed with Daniel's fury, his focus, the predatory joy of a king reclaiming what was stolen. The castle's wards resisted us at first, pushing back with invisible force that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl. But I'd studied them, learned their rhythm. I scattered the first sachet of crushed wolfsbane and ironroot at the threshold, and the ward flickered, wavered, then collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. "Move!" Matthias barked, and we poured through. The throne room doors stood open, as if Victor had been expecting us. Perhaps he had. Arrogance makes men careless. We found him standing before the throne, Daniel's throne, dressed in robes too fine for a counselor, a crown that didn't belong to him resting on his head. His smile was cold and sharp when we entered. "Daniel," he said, almost warmly. "You're harder to kill than I expected." "You should have made sure the job was done," Daniel growled, stalking forward. Victor's eyes slid to me, and his smile widened. "And you brought your little forest witch. How touching." He tilted his head, studying me like I was an insect pinned to a board. "You think a mate bond makes you stronger? It makes you weak. She is your vulnerability, your soft spot, your ruin." He moved faster than I expected, his hand slashing through the air. Dark magic erupted from his palm, a twisting, writhing curse that shot toward me like a spear aimed at my heart. Time slowed. Through the bond, I felt Daniel's terror, felt him lunge, felt his wolf roar in denial. But we'd fought together for weeks. We'd learned to move as one. I threw the pouch of ironroot and wolfsbane directly into the curse's path. The herbs exploded on impact, disrupting the spell's form, unraveling it mid-flight. The curse shattered into harmless sparks that rained down like dying fireflies. And Daniel struck. He was on Victor before the sorcerer could draw breath. Claws tearing through magic-reinforced robes, teeth finding throat. The fight should have lasted longer. Victor was powerful, cunning, dangerous. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd underestimated us. The bond didn't make us weak. It made us lethal. Daniel's claws ripped through Victor's defenses. My second pouch disrupted the protective enchantments woven into his skin. Together, we dismantled him piece by piece, strategy and savagery, precision and fury, 2 halves of a whole moving in perfect, deadly harmony. When Victor fell, the throne room went silent. Blood pooled beneath the false king's body, dark and final. The crown rolled across the stone floor and came to rest at Daniel's feet. He stood over Victor's corpse, chest heaving, covered in blood and victory, his eyes still burning gold. Every wolf in the room knelt, not out of fear, out of recognition. Their true king had returned. Daniel's gaze found mine across the carnage, and the bond surged with relief, so profound it brought tears to my eyes. He crossed to me in 3 long strides and pulled me against him, his hands shaking as they framed my face. "You're safe," he breathed. "We're safe," I corrected. He kissed me hard, claiming, and I felt the throne room's collective attention on us, but I didn't care. Let them see. Let them know their king was mated, bonded, unbreakable. When he finally released me, he kept my hand locked in his and turned to face his wolves. "This is Amira," he said, his voice carrying through the silence. My mate. Your Luna. She saved my life when I was dying in the snow. She broke the curse that stripped my wolf. She stood beside me when the world wanted me dead and fought beside me to reclaim what was stolen. He pulled me forward, and I stood at his shoulder, meeting the eyes of wolves who had served him for years. She is not weak, Daniel continued, his voice edged with steel. She is the reason I stand before you now. She is the reason we won, and she will rule beside me, not behind me, for as long as we both draw breath. The wolves bowed again, deeper, and when they rose, I saw it in their faces: acceptance, respect, loyalty. I was no longer the invisible girl from the forest. I was Luna Queen, bonded to an alpha king, and I had survived. The story of Amira and Daniel teaches us truths that echo beyond the pages of fantasy. First, strength is not measured by where you begin, but by who you choose to become. Amira started as a girl who talked to chickens and knew basic wound care. She became a queen who dismantled curses and fought beside an alpha king. Transformation happens when you refuse to accept the limitations others place on you. Second, true partnership means standing together, not one behind the other. The mate bond didn't make Amira weak or Daniel invincible, it made them complete. They fought as equals, each bringing unique strengths to the battle. Love isn't about one person saving the other, it's about saving each other, again and again. Third, vulnerability shared is power multiplied. The bond was both their greatest strength and their greatest risk. But they didn't let fear of vulnerability keep them apart. They leaned into it, trusted it, and became unstoppable because of it. Finally, your past does not define your future. Daniel lost his wolf, his throne, and nearly his life. Amira lost her mother, her safety, and her quiet existence. But they didn't let loss become their story. They wrote a new one together. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from? What was your favorite moment in Amira and Daniel's journey? Was it the kiss that broke the curse, the first night in the cottage, the final battle? Drop a comment below and let me know which scene made your heart race. Your story matters too.